plotted down right after you came on last time. So I'd just done a marathon. My Vo2 Max was at 53. And I thought as I'm doing this diet, I thought for the sake of helping others that might do it, who might feel the dip. Because I remember the first time I did it, I found the initial week really hard, like energy-wise, running and all that. So I plotted out religiously every run and my Vo2 Max with how the diet affected. And I'll be wondering if you're shocked to see that. So it took me for a month, my VO2 got worse every week. Like I started at 53 and it dropped down to 52, went down to 51. And did it go down to 50 or 51?
Looks like 50.
Yeah, went all the way down to 50 after 3 weeks as my body was trying to get fat adapted. So just finished my day 10 5-kilometer run and still bad energy levels and very disappointing. My VO2 just dropped down to 50. So physically, like I look fit and I feel fit day to day, but just when I'm running, the gas tank's just not there. Like normally I'll feel like I can run at the pace I was going, which was about 5:45 minute Ks. I'll normally feel like I can run forever at that pace. And these runs, I've got like 5 Ks and I'm just like looking, am I there yet? Am I there yet? Like there's just not much left in the tank. And I was actually watching different videos and I was thinking, oh my God, like I don't remember having this long of a drop off on energy. And then, yes, like I remember there was almost like a turning point on a run. Oh, I'm so happy to report I'm on like day 19 now and 100% fat adapted because I just feel incredible today. So I'm doing a 10K. I've just turned around at 5Ks and under the 6-minute pace and just like feeling I'm in third gear. It's awesome. Whew, can't believe I was so close to giving in too. I was just thinking, fuck this, but the way I feel now, we're doing 5:30s on the beach and I just don't feel tired one bit. It's incredible. Oh, sweet. Where I just felt amazing. And then after, is it like from week 4 onwards there, it just sort of goes back up. And then I got it up higher, up to 54. So ended up getting higher than what it was previously.
Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, I felt better straight away. A lot of people don't really notice that lag off because you're getting rid of so many other things that you just start feeling better from that point of view. But yeah, no, it does take a bit of time to do this. It's called keto adaptation or fat adaptation.
I was getting overtaken by like 7-year-olds while I was running. I kid you not.
With testosterone just through the roof.
Well, they were all carnivores. So,
exactly.
But I for some reason, it hits me hard. So anyone listening, because a lot of people that come to watch these sort of videos, they're new to carnivore and they're probably in their first week.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it can, for me anyway, it was hell. Like
You've had a lot of DM questions around where do I start? What food should everyone keeps asking about what a day-to-day diet
a daily
like,
meal plan. We
seems
should
to be that everyone wants.
Yeah. That's what I get so many DMs. People are like, so what do you eat for breakfast? So I'll quickly run through a real rough. I get up every morning. I was going to ask you this because I'm awake at 4:30 a.m. Like just firing. I go up and I do my most productive 2 hours of work in the morning.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Should I just lean into it and just not try and...
No, you just lucked out. You literally have more hours in the day. Everyone say, we need more hours in the day. You have them. Enjoy it.
But that could be, as someone could say that as a downside, that you wake up early, or you could look at it as I guess I am, as a positive, because I get so much work achieved on video editing at that time. But I have my first coffee at 6 a.m. and then I'll do my run. I run every day fasted. If I'm really sore from skating, I'll probably ride a bike, but pretty much running every day. And then I get home, I have my first meal at about 10-ish normally, and that's usually 4 eggs and a lamb rump steak. Occasionally it'll be bacon, or today like I had an actual beef rump. And then that, I could honestly, after that big 4 eggs and steak, get through to dinner if I wanted. But normally I'm like going skating and being a bit more active. So then I'll normally have another meal at around 3 o'clock, just on school pickup, which will be leftover meat. Sometimes I have a bit of cheese, or it'll be tuna or fish that I've caught. And I have that normally with another egg as well. And then I don't do any snacking in between. Oh, sorry. The other thing I missed was after my first meal at 10, I have a second coffee, but only one shot. And then, have that second meal around school pickup time. And then that gets me through to dinner. And then dinner's generally a Scotch fillet steak with another 2 eggs and a bit of cheese.
Yeah.
Do you have cheese? Or you don't have it?
Rarely. Yeah. And some people are okay with it. People with autoimmune issues probably should avoid it. People that are trying to lose weight should probably avoid it. There are things called casomorphines that are, that are in there to tell the baby animal to eat and eat and eat and eat, because it needs to grow up big and strong, because babies are vulnerable. Most of the things that get eaten in nature are babies. They're the easy target, right? And so when they're drinking milk, they need to be drinking a lot of it, and they need to grow quickly. So when we eat that as an adult, it tells us to eat and eat and eat and eat. So you can overeat, and so that can be a way that people can put on a bit of weight that they don't want to, or stall on their weight loss. And also, casein is a bit pro-inflammatory, especially the A1 casein. We've only been really drinking cow's milk and for sort of the last 15,000 years or so, and we can look at lactase persistence in our genome. That's really only started becoming more prevalent in the last sort of 10 to 15,000 years, since the megafauna died out, and we don't have all these big fatty woolly mammoths and giant sloths and things like that we were eating that had a lot of fat on them, because the larger an animal, typically the larger proportion of fat they have as a percentage of body mass. And this is why we normally go after big animals. We're big game hunters, because we need that fat. And then we started moving to dairy, and from a biggest animal that we had, which was big cow, and then getting the milk fat from that, and the butter and the
I cut milk out of my diet, but I do have a cup of tea after dinner with a tiny bit of milk.
Yeah.
My coffee, I just have cream.
Usually fine. I mean, the cream's probably better than the coffee. Right?
Yeah.
So
I just do it to get the extra fat.
Yeah. Well, and the fat's good, and especially if you do fine with that. Some people with autoimmune issues just need to cut out dairy and leave that out, because just all these different things will trigger them. They just have to stick to this really red meat and water. So that's pretty much what I do. I mean, I don't have any autoimmune issues, but I just feel best on just beef and water.
What's your diet? You I remember from history on previous shows with us, is it steak in the morning, or you just do dinner?
No, usually dinner. I mean, if I'm hungry, I'll eat steak. That's what I eat.
Yeah.
I just eat ribeyes and Scotch fillet, things like that.
So you fast most of the day and just have dinner?
It's not really about fasting. I'm just not hungry.
Yeah.
So if I'm hungry, I'll eat, but I'll eat beef, So if I'm sedentary and not really doing much, I don't tend to be all that hungry.
Have you eaten today?
No.
You'll just have this evening a big steak for dinner?
Big old steak, yeah.
Eggs?
Not today. I only have beef. So.
Beef with beef. That's respectable.
Yeah, beef on
you
beef.
need to get chickens, Whitey.
I used to have chicken.
Yeah, I know.
I don't really eat too much chicken.
We have like 5 eggs at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, not anymore.
Oh yeah, for the eggs. No,
Yeah,
I have. At the end of the day, I've usually had 6 to 8 eggs
A day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and eggs are great.
Yeah.
Especially if they're pasture raised.
Save money.
Yeah. No, ours are free range.
Yeah. And
we get them delivered.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So free range or pasture?
Or there's from this Ruby's Organics, however they're doing. Sarah takes care of all the food orders.
Yeah, because free range, it's a bit funny how they do this wording, because people look at this, free range, I want something out there eating its own natural diet, because that matters. It's part of the food chain, and if you break the food chain and you're feeding it a bunch of garbage it's not designed to eat, it's not going to have the nutrients that you want, right? And it may have the bad things from plants and other sorts of things, chemicals, whatever. So free range, they're typically living in a barn. They're not in cages, so that's good. But all the food's inside, the warmth is inside, and they just have little doggy doors on the side of the barn that they could access, but they almost never do. So they have to have access to at least a certain square foot per chicken or something like that. So they have a barn in the middle of a field, and the chickens just stay in the barn basically. And but pasture raised means that they have to be out on grass. Now they could be giving them a bunch of corn and soy and bullshit on the grass, but they at least have to be on grass.
Yeah.
And so that's that can make a difference. Joel Salatin who's a large scale regenerative farmer in America, and his pasture raised chickens and eggs. He compared that to the USDA average for eggs. So we looked at folate. So a USDA egg had an average of 42 milligrams of folate, and his eggs had over 1,000. Right, so there's a big difference in the nutrient content of these things. Now, any old egg is still going to be extremely nutritious, but you can do even better by going, with a chicken that's eating what it's supposed to eat. I was just going to say too, on your Vo2 Max, noticing your dip, that does make perfect sense. There's actually, one of the things that people say that, oh, you shouldn't do a ketogenic diet for athletes. One of those things they reference is something called the Supernova trial, where they looked at people going on a ketogenic diet for like 2 to 3 weeks, and then they tested them. And they looked at, oh, look, their fat oxidation is way up. Okay, but they're not actually utilizing that energy, and they're not able to perform. Fine. It was only like a 2-3 week study. Right, they weren't fat adapted, they weren't keto adapted. They hadn't allowed you turn on different epigenetic effects. You're turning on different genes that allow you to utilize those ketones properly. So you're making a bunch of ketones, but you're not using them, which is why you can measure them in your urine, and people do their urine test strips. Oh, look at that, I'm in ketosis, and it's just like, right, but that's because you're not using those ketones, and so you have to pee them out. Right, you just have too many of them, and then. After a few months, people are like, oh my God, I'm not in ketosis anymore. What the hell's going on? My urine doesn't have ketones. It's because you're using them, and they don't need to be eliminated in your urine. And so that's part of that adaptation process. And so it takes weeks. So with Tim Noakes, he found that usually after about 3-4 weeks, that's like what you saw. That's typically what people were pretty, fat and could compete at a similar level to where they were before at about that point. But he left it for 6 weeks. And so he had one trial where they're doing, series of 800 meter, runs. They're just doing one after the other, because you're saying, well, but you have this glycogen stored up over time. So, okay, well, let's run the hell out of that glycogen and get it the hell out of there. So we know that we're only running on fat. And these guys were competing at the same level and were able to get the same times. And then they did a crossover trial. They switched them over, get a two week washout period, and then the keto group became normal, and the normal group became keto. And so another 6 weeks on top of that to get fat adapted. And they looked at that, and they had, again, the exact same performance. So we know it doesn't drop your performance after 6 weeks.
Something I've just realized I should add to that graph. So that's just my cardiovascular fitness that dipped for a month, and then actually after 3 months I'm higher than where I started. But I was doing planche training through this, very structured, very similar, and I had a massive improvement in my planche way quicker within a week. And I guess that's because I probably lost 2 to 3 kilos of water weight, like not having the carbs and sugar. So I was lighter, so I was able to planche better. Yeah. But my strength benefits came a lot quicker and more pronounced than the cardio. The cardio definitely took longer. Yeah.
That's good. I mean, I noticed similar things too. I didn't have any drop offs in my lifts and things like that. Yeah. In fact, it was just sort of getting better and better and better as it went. One thing that we know too, when we look at Vo2 Max, people will say, well, you have to be in your zone 2 running. You want to have your heart rate below this because you're Vo2 Max. You want to be below that because that's when you're burning fat, right? That's based on carbohydrate biomechanics. And so if you're in a carbohydrate fueled metabolism, you're eating carbohydrates, studies have shown that you really only get fat oxidation up to about 60% Vo2 max, and then it really tapers off and drops off, and then you're just carbs after that. So it's like, oh, well, you're going to be burning carbs after that. So that's why I say these high intensity athletes that are doing these higher Vo2 max, they're really pushing themselves maximally. You just can't do that on a ketogenic diet because you need carbs after that. Well, hey, you make carbs, so that's a moot point anyway. But that's only if you're eating carbs in the first place. When you look at these people, I think it was Volex Faster trial, they found that people that had been keto adapted, I think they self-selected into the keto group and a carb group, and they gave them 12 weeks, right? So, 3 months, like where you're at. And they found that at that point that they were still burning fat over 90% Vo2 Max, right? And so when they looked at the energy that they were burning, it was 90% fat and only 10% carbs. And it was a much different swing for the carb group, right? For the same exercises, right? So, but you're going to be using fat. That's what we're supposed to be using. That's our fuel. We store that. That's our most abundant fuel source. If we need glycogen for this. Well, you have glycogen. You make glycogen, but glycogen is a much more inferior energy storage form than fat is. Massively inferior. When you have when you're maxed out on glycogen, right? And you have your liver full and all your muscles full of glycogen, for a 65 kilo person, and I think I mentioned this last time, and I flipped around joules and calories, but in calories, if you have a 65 kilo athlete with 6% body fat, they have about 2,400 kilocalories of energy in all their glycogen in their liver and muscles. Okay, so good. That's like a day or something like that. But, if you're doing a high intensity exercise, if you're running a marathon, if you're playing a rugby game, if you're in a wrestling match, like you use a ton of energy, right? And, but when you're looking at your fat, so that same 65 kilo individual with only 6% body fat, that 6% body fat, so super lean guy, that has nearly 35,000 kilocalories of energy available, right? So it's 15 times the amount of energy, right? So it's a massive difference. And you just tapped into this nearly limitless energy supply, even as a very slim athlete individual. You just have tons of energy. The idea that you're going to run through 35,000 calories and, and not everybody's 6% body fat, right? So even if, when I'm working out and lifting weights and playing rugby on Carnivore, I usually checked with calipers, however accurate that is. I would get down to about 6% body fat, 5-6% body fat. But I'm 110 kilos as well. So, I've got an extra 40, 45 kilos of weight on top of that. So that 6% body fat is even more than 35,000 kilocalories. I got a ton. I mean, I'm not running out of anything.
I was actually, interestingly enough, at dinner on the weekend with a couple of rugby guys, and they knew you, Damien.
Oh,
said
yeah.
When,
Damo.
Yeah. He said to say hi, actually.
Yeah.
He was shocked. I was like, I'm actually getting Chaffee on Monday.
Yeah, nice.
And I was telling them, they were kind of asking a lot, because at dinner, obviously, I was selective with what I eat, and the dessert, it was a creme brulee. I had a token spoonful, but there was a little ball of ice cream that was horrendous. Like, it tasted so sugary, I couldn't touch that. But the creme brulee, if I wasn't health conscious, I could have easily eaten that thing. But I was very good. I didn't drink anything. We're talking about the diet, and the thing that struck me, like a vivid memory I have after going through that low patch of running, must be when ketosis has properly kicked in, or fat adaptation. But it wasn't only the feeling of like you're running on top of the ground again, but all my senses were, it's like hyper stimulated. Like, I could hear every noise. I could hear the ocean. I could hear a car coming. I could hear a bird chirping. And I just felt so sharp and locked in. Like, Neo in the Matrix, where he's just like seeing everything. Felt like I had 5% of Matrix. And then that feeling of being more sort of situationally aware where you are in the world, like, it actually stays with you when on the diet. And is that possible? Like, what is that? Is that like, I feel like, for instance, if I have a couple of carbs, I feel like you get dumbed down a bit. Like, you feel, and Sarah says, if I have a wine or whatever, that night I'll snore every time. And you get like sluggish. Yeah, it's like it must be the tiniest amount, but it's enough to affect the way you sort of feel.
A brain fog feeling, hey?
Well, I mean, there are these toxins that, and especially when you're not used to them, and you stopped having a tolerance. Like if you don't drink for 6 months, a drink is going to hit you harder than if you were drinking every day, right? If you just back in the partying days and things like that, if you were going out on the weekends, things like that, it takes a certain amount of booze to get where you're going.
Yeah.
And then if you don't drink for 6 months or a year, you go and try to drink at that same level, you're done, So because of that tolerance. And so the tolerance builds up, but the tolerance also goes away because your body's very efficient. It's not going to waste time building up, barriers if they're not necessary, because it takes energy and resources. And so when you stop eating all these plants or alcohol or these other sorts of things, the tolerance goes away, as it should, because you don't need it. And then it comes through and it's just this undefended gate and you just get hit in the face with it. And you're just like, oh my God.
I can't even stand red wine. I used to love red wine. I cannot even sip it. It just tastes acidic.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest
thing. It is. And we get used to it,
but
right?
I can drink white wine, but it's just red for some reason. I can't drink that anymore.
Yeah.
Your palate's gone.
Yeah.
I hate white wine though. I reckon it's so chemically. It just tastes like
it's sugary too.
Yeah,
sometimes.
that leaves that.
You see on movies and there's like a character and they put him in a mental asylum and they get drugged and they're just like dumber and you feel really sorry for him. That's honestly how I feel after I have carbs. I feel like someone's drugged me or something.
But it does shut off your brain. I mean, there's what's it called? There's a book called Grain Brain. Talking about this actually is detrimental to your brain. I have patients that I put them on a carnivore diet and
brain. I'm going to use that.
There's a book called Grain Brain. It talks about it, how this screws up your brain.
It's a real thing.
And it is. And, I've had patients that would talk about, have different sorts of needs. I'm like, listen, I think that for all these different reasons, you have diabetes, autoimmunity, I think it's really important for you to go like full bore carnivore. And they're like, oh God, okay. And they never heard about it before, right? So they're like, oh, okay. And, so you get them on it and you say, look, let's just try it for 30 days to see how you go. And they're like, okay, I can do that. Do it for 30 days. They come back in, they're doing great. They're losing weight. Things are getting better. And they're like, hey, can we do something else? Can we just open it up a little bit? Because I find it's really restrictive. It's really difficult. Like I am feeling better, but this is is there anything else I can eat just for my own sanity? It's like, look, we can open it up and you have sort of these different sorts of things, but I really think you need to be ketogenic because of the diabetes and all this sort of stuff. And they're like, look, I can deal with that. I just need a few more options just to feel better about it. They come back a few weeks later and they always sort of have this, there's two people in particular that this happened to, and they came in, there's just sort of this sort of defeated look on their face. And they're like, I was like, how are you feeling? And they're like, I think I'm going to have to go back on carnivore because like I just felt so much better on it. I didn't even realize how good I felt until I came off of it. And that's the thing. People don't realize how bad they feel until they stop feeling bad. And then when they go back to it, then they all of a sudden get smacked in the face. I'm like, oh God, oh, not that again. Specifically for your brain wants to run on ketones. There's a lot of stuff going around saying that your brain's primary fuel source is glucose and ketones are a backup source. That is complete and utter nonsense. Very easy to test. If you have high carbohydrates and you're eating a whole bunch of carbs and things like that, you take exogenous ketones. What happens? Your brain runs on those ketones. Your brain flips and only starts running on the ketones. And you've got abundance of glucose. That's because your brain wants those ketones more. When you're in a normal metabolic state, which is what a ketogenic state is, I think that's our primary metabolic state. That's a primary metabolic state of nearly every animal on earth, carnivore and herbivore. Carnivores are eating animals with fat and protein. They don't get a bunch of carbs. They're in ketosis. We have tested this. Lions are in ketosis. Wolves are in ketosis. But then cows and gorillas were eating carbs in the form of fiber, but it's not actually carbs because they can't break down fiber into glucose. It's the bacteria that they cultivate in their guts that are eating the fiber. And as a byproduct, they make saturated fat. And then those microbes die off and they're digested and broken down and absorbed as protein. So they eat grass, tree, leaves and fiber, but what they absorb is fat and protein.
So what's their metabolic state?
Would be, I haven't seen anybody who's actually tested that, but
brain.
What else? But what else is it going to be, right? They're not getting in carbohydrates in their diet, so it would have to be It's a fat burning metabolism. All animals store fat so they can burn fat. They're not trying to burn carbs, unless you're like a bumblebee or a hummingbird or something like that. So the natural metabolism of nearly every animal is that ketogenic sort of fat-driven metabolism, right? And so when you have ketones available, right, and you have an abundance of glucose, most of your brain, 2/3 of your brain, including the neocortex, which is where we do our thinking, only run on the ketones, right? There's still parts that still run on glucose, which is why you make glucose and you have abundance. And there's the difference between glucose and eating carbs, because you don't need to eat carbs. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. You make all the carbohydrates you need for every single physiological function of your body and your brain to perfect exacting levels, right? And so, yes, you use carbs for some things. It's actually a minor portion of the energy that we use in our muscles and our brain and our organs, right? Majority of what we're using is fat oxidation, and ketones. And so we see this when you're in a state of nutritional ketosis and you have ketones available, even though you have perfectly normal blood sugar, because it's not like, oh, you just don't have any sugar anymore because you didn't eat it. No, you make it. It's still, you have perfect blood sugar levels. Why do we know what the optimal range for blood sugar is? It's because that's exactly what your body does if left alone, right? And so you have ketones and you have blood sugar, and 2/3 of your brain are only running on ketones, even though there's blood sugar available. It says, no, thank you. That's a preference. So that's a primary energy source. So how are we saying that glucose is the primary energy source and ketones are a secondary energy source when it's clearly the opposite? When you have both available, your brain just runs on the ketones. And it's only when your ketones start dropping down that you fill in the gaps with the glucose. So that's obviously a secondary alternate fuel source, right? Your brain works better on ketones. And so when you go into ketosis, people's brains work better. They feel more sharp. They feel more alert.
So that sharp feeling I have, it's real.
It's absolutely real.
Absolutely. Just, no glucose, just ketones.
Yeah. And we're seeing this in Alzheimer's patients, right? Alzheimer's is now being called type 3 diabetes because you're getting insulin resistance of the brain. You're not getting enough glucose into the brain, and the brain is atrophying. It's actually shrinking down because it's not getting all the energy and nutrients, because most people are being put on a low-fat, heart-healthy diet, and they're just withering away. The brain is made out of fat and cholesterol. They're being put on statins, which cross the blood-brain barrier and prevent your brain from making cholesterol. Your brain makes cholesterol. That's how important cholesterol is to your brain. Every cell in your body makes cholesterol. That's how important cholesterol is to your body. And statins prevent your body from making the good cholesterols that you want. It doesn't do anything about mopping up, SD-LDL or triglycerides or this and that. It prevents your body from making and synthesizing LDL cholesterol in the first place, or LDL particles in the first place. So when you prevent your brain from making cholesterol, now your brain doesn't have the appropriate amount of cholesterol to support the physical structures of your brain, and they start to degrade because there's always this balance between breakdown and repair. So you're constantly having a bit of breakdown. You want to repair with new things. So you have these older, junky sort of things are sort of breaking down, and you're going to repair those with new things. Great. But if you only have the breakdown and you can't really repair because you don't have the building blocks, you just get the breakdown. And now you don't have energy as well, and so the brain shrinks. And we see this on MRIs for Alzheimer's patients. The brain just shrinks, right? And then you get all the problems of dementia. And just going back to what we were talking about with heart disease before, if these problems have just been going on for so long, and it's just a natural state of humanity, then why is it that the first heart attack that was publicly recorded in America was in 1912? And why is it that Alzheimer's disease, which was named after Dr. Alzheimer's, which how you get your name immortalized, right, by describing a new pathology and say, "Ooh, look at this! I found something new. I'm the first one to write about it." That person's name is always associated with that. So Dr. Alzheimer's is the first person to describe this. He had a lady in her 70s that had this weird neurodevelopmental or neurocognitive decline in her 70s. And this had never been seen before. And nothing like that had ever been seen before. It had never been reported on. It's nowhere in the medical literature. And he reported that as a single case report at a conference in 1906. Right? So the founding fathers of America, John Adams, Jefferson, all these people, they were born in the mid 1700s. John Adams was 92 when he died. Jefferson was 84. Unless they were killed by something, they lived to be in their 80s and 90s. No Alzheimer's, right? Now it's being called type 3 diabetes. Okay, well, diabetes just went nuts recently as well. So how does this relate to ketones? Well, they've done randomized controlled trials with thousands of patients with Alzheimer's. And they found by putting them on a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet that was a better treatment for Alzheimer's than every medication ever trialed by a factor of 50.
Wow.
Right? So you got about a 1% improvement in the best Alzheimer's medications. You have 50% improvement with ketogenic diets.
All brain chemistry.
So it is just basic physiology that we're just ignoring blatantly, right? And so when you go into a ketogenic diet and you run on ketones, you don't need insulin to run on ketones. The ketones just go straight into the brain, and literally within days, people all of a sudden they start brightening up. They're getting more alert. They're getting away from that brain fog.
Do you think we'll start to see our Alzheimer, the rate as this becomes more known, start to come down?
I certainly hope so. There's going to be other factors as well, other sorts of influences, medications, like I just said. But well, yeah, I mean, we are seeing people reversing Alzheimer's with ketogenic diets. There's a guy. I mean, we have clinical trials showing that you can do that, and you can improve people's MOCAs and MMSCs and all these different sorts of tests that they use by putting them on ketogenic diets and high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diets, and giving them the building blocks to rebuild their brain. That's another thing about ketones is they cross the blood-brain barrier and reconstitute into fatty acids and actually help make the physical structures and the matrix of the brain. So you can actually rebuild the brain, and you're getting B12, which is required to build the brain. You have there's a study out of Oxford University in 2008 that showed that that people that had B12 levels of same numbers here in Australia, I think it was under like 330 or 350 picomoles per liter, that after 5 years on MRI, they did serial MRIs every year, and after 5 years their brain shrank by over 5% volume, right? Because you require B12 to myelinate the axons of your nerve cells, your brain cells, your neurons, right? They have these axons, big long nerve that comes down. But the majority of the mass of your brain is that white matter, that myelination. And so if you get this breakdown and repair and you're breaking it down, but you don't have enough B12 to repair, it's just breaking down. And so that myelination, that white matter starts decaying and you start getting nerve damage.
How do we get more B12?
Meat. It's the only dietary source of B12 is only in meat. Liver's the best source. The people that have MTHFR gene mutation, they may just need a bit more. They may not get enough even from red meat. And so adding in a bit of liver, literally a couple bites 3 days a week is fine, for almost everybody. Then some people have malabsorption issues. There's people that have pernicious anemia, which is actually more common than people realize. It's just that it's not always complete. You have pernicious anemia, it's an autoimmune disease, and you get damage to your parietal cells in your stomach, and they make something called intrinsic factor, which releases and binds to B12. And if you don't have B12 bound to intrinsic factor, you can't absorb it really. So if you've damaged those cells, or those cells have been damaged, and we have different surgeries and bypasses and sleeves and things like that, where you're cutting out chunks of the stomach, and actually they're important parts, and so you can give somebody pernicious anemia by botching that surgery, or having another surgery or something like that, or some sort of injury. And but it can also become from an autoimmune issue, and then they just can't absorb B12 and they'll die, right? But before those cells get completely damaged, you're just going to get slightly lower levels, and even if you're eating a whole bunch of meat. So I've had patients that have come in on a carnivore diet, they've done amazingly well, felt fantastic. Their B12 was crazy low, and it's like, okay, well, we need to get that up. So give them an injection because they're below that mark where you're actually getting brain shrinkage and brain damage, even though the levels here in Australia, it can go down to 130. But yeah, that's fine. Like, you out of your mind? Your brains are shrinking, at double that.
How long does it take to get your levels up just without an injection, just eating meat?
It can take months.
Yeah, okay.
But it'll come up. If you're eating it more high density, like liver and things like that, it can come up pretty quick. It's fat. It's a water soluble vitamin, so it can come up fairly quickly, and you feel a lot better. But the benefits that you're going to be getting are short term and long term. Short term, you'll definitely feel a lot better. You'll have much more mental clarity. I mean, I give people an injection when their B12 levels are way too low, and they'll tell me, they'll come back in a few weeks, and they'll say, like, yeah, after you gave you that shot, it was like 20 minutes after we left, it was like my brain just turned on, and it was like, wow, I haven't had that in a while. And then you're able to maintain those good levels with the diet. But some people came in, they're very low. You give them a shot, they feel much better, and they're feeling a lot better on the diet. But then their B12 just keeps sort of coming down. Okay, just eating beef. Okay, add in some liver. Okay, they add in liver, and it still just keeps going down to what I would say is really suboptimal levels. But they're still within the range of that's totally healthy. If you went to your GP, they'd say, yeah, that's totally fine. But the reference ranges that we use from the labs are just averages for the community. And the average person is sick. The average person is overweight. The average person is, metabolically infirm and malnourished. And so now that everybody's shifting to more plant-based and everybody's B12 is going down because you can't get B12 from plants, everyone's B12 is going down. And so because everybody's B12 is down, now the average is going down. So that is shifting left. And because everyone's B12 deficient, now no one's B12 deficient. And that's obviously wrong, because we know from studies like that Oxford study, you can get serious neurological harm from having it below a certain level that is in that reference range, right? So I go by actual studies and data and evidence as opposed to just an average.
It's so fascinating to me that there's so many humans out there that have deficiencies, and it's as black and white as giving them a shot of something that they're lacking. Like someone probably has put up for like 5 years of being really low in a certain area, and all it was a simple diet. Obviously is the proper way to fix it, but
yeah.
But again, they live with it because we're so adaptable. They don't realize that how they feel isn't normal. And then when you give them that shot, they're like, shit, this is how I haven't been feeling.
How good is it? Because we always talk about diet on here, and obviously we have no idea what we're talking about. We're just like pure bro science. And then when you come in, I just hear it all. It reinforces so much of how I feel, just hearing you putting it out there, and then understanding that I'm not imagining it. No. You're describing these processes that are actual real processes that anyone can go and do and feel if they want to.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this diet. Hey, I advocate it because I feel so good on it. I want other people to feel good, but I don't gain anything from telling someone to go carnivore. Like, I don't make any money from it or anything. It's just, I can only relay how I feel. And I never want to do that to someone if it's detrimental to them. Like, I don't want to say, go do this, and it's bad. But the more I hear you talk, the more I realize what I think, which is it's
reaffirms it for you.
Yeah, reaffirms it. And now I don't feel bad at all about telling people to go carb free or sugar free or whatever.
It is always so interesting just listening to you. I could sit here and just listen to you talk, and you always gain some gold as well.
And the people listening that are probably new to this diet, 100% give it. You can't just do it for 2 or 3 weeks to see how you feel.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to commit over 4 weeks, I reckon.
Yeah.
And then once you get past that hump of the 70-year-olds overtaking you when you're running, once you pass that, you will not look back. And if you do, you fall off the wagon, you just jump back on the wagon.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's so easy to go out at Christmas time, have drinks and all that. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that do 90% right, and then you just fall off the wagon a bit. But I'm all for having a few, like, I have a wine with Sarah every now and then, but I just know as long as I don't go too far down the bad path, it's easy just to go back.
Yeah. As long as you just sort of get back on the train. I do see people, friends of mine, rugby players and things like that they they did it and they're like, wow, I just felt amazing. And I just felt so good. I felt the strength. First week they said I felt stronger than I've ever been, and then that weekend they were at their parents' house and they had a bunch of rice, and they was like, so I had some rice. So Yeah, I guess I can't do
Toblerone did it to me once a few years ago. I remember with Father's Day, I got a massive Toblerone, and
those things are getting bigger and bigger.
it was huge. And man,
Yeah.
I remember that was the end of one of my carnivore stints.
Yeah.
But now like I feel like 7 months really strict. I reckon it's a lifelong sort of venture now for me.
I want to get a scotchy tonight. I've got to keep I've got to get back to work, but you guys can keep going.
Yeah.
I want to get, you've inspired me to get some scotchies.